Because, Jeremy, let's start with one that George and I talked a bit about yesterday, which was, of course, Winston Peters. And I told some stories about Winston. I said that he was fun to talk to as a broadcaster, but he is a curmudgeon and he's difficult. And that's one of the reasons he's fun to talk to. And I told a few stories about how he seems to be someone who threatens a lot, but never actually does. And you and I were involved in a podcast around a couple of election cycles called The Slightly Correct Political Show, where Winston came on our podcast. And I think the answer was, I think what happened from memory was David Farrer's company had put out some polling that Winston thought was wrong, misleading, deceptive, or whatever. That's and right. On the podcast, he threatened legal action against David Farrer, and then never did anything. And I was highlighting that that's an MO of Mr. Peters often, that he makes lots of noise about doing something then doesn't, and was wondering if he'd take legal action about this. Proves he hasn't needed to because things are reversed. But first, you're welcome to jump in right now because I've talked a bit about your and I's interaction with Winston. But do you want to share any thoughts about the whole thing first?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. My interactions with him, with you, and then running into him a little bit socially. He's a guy who he professionally has his backup. You know, he comes in with his defenses. I remember him coming into our podcast, whether it was the first or second time we had him on. I don't think it was the same time that you're talking about with the legal action, but you just knew that he came in ready to be attacked. And ready to go on the counterattack. And then actually we actually had nothing to attack him about. We just wanted to have a chat to him. Yeah. And he physically, visibly relaxed. So yeah, he is a guy who goes, this whole thing, I mean, the trespass notice I did think was a stretch. The fact that it's been withdrawn, it's a bad look for the speaker. The fact that Winston Peters has come out today saying, calling for a vote of no confidence. I'm not sure if he realizes he's not actually in Parliament, so can't actually make that happen. But the one thing you have to admire about Winston is, he's the absolute master of getting himself in a headline. It's, he did it during the protests, which is why this trespass notice was issued initially. He was absolutely right in the fact that he was only there because the protesters had asked to speak to him and other members of Parliament, and he turned up despite not being a member of Parliament. He's an absolute master at managing to make the news cycle rotate around him. And it's the secret to his longevity in Parliament, in the public eye. Yeah. I mean, he's the guy who gets more headlines when he's not a member of Parliament than 90% of the members of Parliament who are.
I think that that's the beauty of Winston Peters, and I've said this for a long time. And look, this is going to maybe sound a bit disrespectful. It's actually not meant to. He is probably the best opposition MP that we've seen in this generation of MPs.
I completely agree.
Because when he's been in power, he's basically achieved nothing. And people will go, "Oh, the gold card." It's like, yeah, okay. It was like, I've got this app in my phone called Store Card, and it's all your loyalty cards in one thing. And they just go to New World and just scan your phone now. He basically did that because he just amalgamated all the other benefits into one card. Other than that, and there was the wine box, right? And in the 80s, the wine box was huge, right? But other than those two things, well, I mean, the wine box wasn't necessarily achieving something in government, but he's a brilliant opposition MP because he's, as you say, controversial, and he comes in with his backup, and he always tries to find an angle of counterpoint against someone, even if it's a good point. And yeah, I laughed when I saw him calling for a vote of no confidence against the speaker, as you said, and I just thought it's kind of like a former All Black going, "Oh, they should fire this coach. Get rid of this coach. He's useless. We should call for a vote of firing the All Blacks coach because he's no." I just thought, yeah, but then again, exactly what you said is sort of what we said yesterday, which is without Trevor Mallard's balls up, and this is a balls up by Trevor Mallard.
It is.
We would not be talking about Winston Peters today. He would not be milking it for everything it's worth, and he wouldn't be back in the headlines. Shall we have a look at the actual? This is the story from last night on the retraction. We'll see what this has got to say for people who haven't caught up with it entirely, and then we'll come back to it.
He's the referee in the debating chamber, the landlord of Parliament, and the third most powerful person in politics after the Governor-General and Prime Minister. But it hasn't been a great day in the office.
It's an unholy mess, really.
It's absolutely shambolic.
Absolute schmozzle.
This afternoon, Trevor Mallard withdrew 5 trespass notices for people who were at the anti-mandate protest, including the former Deputy Prime Minister and a former MP.
It's total shambles, and it shouldn't take a threat of legal action to bring the Speaker to his senses.
The only reason it's been withdrawn is because of the public backlash. It's been significant.
We said yesterday, Jeremy, there's a problem that there are a group of people who like to shout, "Get off my lawn." Winston Peters is one of those people, but what Trevor Mallard has done is he's gone and stood on Winston Peters' front lawn, and Winston said, "Get off my lawn." And in this instance, in this occasion, Winston was right to say, "Get off my lawn," because there was someone standing on his lawn. And when you give the justification for someone to say, "Yell, get off my lawn," then you're giving ear to something that is normally a non-story or a person that's not, when I say not worthy of being covered, I don't mean he's a human being as a worthy person, but
no.
It's not a headline. There's not a headline generally that's going to be happening around this person unless you stand on their lawn. And Trevor Mallard stood on his lawn. He probably put the sprinklers on as well, but he stood on his lawn. You know what I'm saying?
Playing Barry Manilow. Absolutely. I mean, I think the person who must be most grateful that Winston Peters got involved in all of this is Matt King. If Matt King had been trespassed and not Winston, this would not be a news story anymore. Because I think actually there's actually quite a good justification for trespassing someone like Matt King. Some of the things he said during those protests. I'm all for free speech, but if you're going to wield that particular stick, you maybe had an idea of doing that. But yeah, as soon as Winston gets involved, it's headline news, it's front page news, and everyone gets sucked along in the what's the word I'm looking for? The flow behind him.
Slipstream.
I mean, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. I mean, it's fascinating. If you look at those 3 sound bites that pop up, Chris Bishop is the third person in those sound bites. It's Winston Peters, it's David Seymour, it's Chris Bishop. Whereas, the only one of those who really has any potential power is Bishop. But of course, they go to Winston first because he's the king of the soundbite. David Seymour's been doing a really good job of he's really managed his soundbite game over the last few years. And there's another story. I mean, I was talking about this with someone the other day. ACT have a handful of MPs. Has anyone heard anything from them? No, because Seymour has managed to make the party about him, which is a leaf straight out of the Winston Peters playbook.
They used to call New Zealand First Winston first. So
there used to be a running joke. I mean, going back to what you said about he would appear in an election. You knew an election was coming up when Winston Peters was suddenly back on the news, because then, especially when he was when he was actually in government, what you said, he would basically disappear for 3 years. And then come back up at election time. In opposition, different story. He'd be there the whole time.
Which is why I think he was such an effective opposition MP. We'll take a bit more of this feed after the Matt King. This is the same story. It went on to talk about
151 trespass notices have been issued. Of those, 144, nearly all of them, were actually arrested by.
And I think that's an important point to play. And this is what we said yesterday: is that in America it's not the same, but in America you can only be trespassed from public property if you've broken the law. And I think if you're involved with the riots, if you've set fires, if you've thrown bricks, if you've actually broken laws other than congregating on public land, then absolutely you should be doing that. What are you doing, dog? Dog's breaking something. But yeah, so I'm not saying that there shouldn't have been trespass notice. I'm saying that there should be a metric, which is was there criminal activity?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think going back to Trevor Mallard, he's made 2 fundamental mistakes. The first one just being it's an overreach. I mean, it really is. There's whether there is or not, it feels like there's an element of spite involved.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now that whether perception is everything. I can sort of understand the logic behind it, but yeah, the perception is that this is Mallard. He's angry that people were on his lawn, to use your analogy, and he's come out swinging. The second fundamental mistake he's made is that he's got Winston Peters involved in it, and that takes it from being a slightly off decision that kind of happens and disappears out of the public eye. I think this withdrawal of the trespassers probably would have happened regardless, because I agree with you. I think there's very little legal stance for it. If anyone had taken legal action, I think they would have gotten through. But as soon as you bring Winston Peters into it, it's like flicking on a spotlight, lighting up the Sky Tower, and setting off a fireworks show all at the same time. The country is not going to ignore it. The media love this guy. He's a walking, talking headline, soundbite wrapped into this enigma that is Winston Peters. So yeah, it's played out exactly the way that it was always going to, and exactly the way Trevor Mallard probably did not want it to.